12th, we arrive right in the heart of Washington, D.C. Red Caps helping us get the bags off the train, and they're going to meet us out front with the baggage at the taxi stand. So all we have to do is walk through the station and make our way to the taxis for our transfer to the hotel. Union Station, what a spot. Shops and restaurants all around you. Right outside. And you'll find this is an excellent place to have lunch. There must be 3 dozen eateries you can pick from, especially downstairs in the food court. When it opened in 1907, it was the largest and grandest train station in the world, modeled after the ancient Roman baths of Diocletian. What a fabulous structure. It's recently been renovated, and today it houses a host of shops. There's movies, there's restaurants, cafes. It's a very trendy urban center nowadays, more than just a simple train station, which makes a great start to our visit to Washington. They even have statues of Roman legionnaires looking out over the station. It was designed by the great Chicago architect Daniel Burnham, whose motto was, "Make no little plans." We'll be staying in Washington for 4 nights and having a real good look around, starting here at Union Station, one of the landmarks of town. Almost torn down 20 years ago, but it's been renovated and reopened as a major shopping mall. And on the way from the station to the hotel, we see Senator Dan Inouye. We'll meet more of our congressional delegation later in the program. Main things to cover in Washington are the museums and the monuments and the political places, the Capitol and the offices of our Congress people. So that's it in a nutshell. And as far as the museums, there are 8 Smithsonian museums on the mall. And in addition, there's 6 more Smithsonian museums scattered around the rest of the city. And then in addition to that, on the mall is the National Gallery of Art, which is not part of the Smithsonian. It's a quasi-public museum. All of those museums are free. Yay, free. The museums are generally open from 10 till 5. But we go through the air and space and then out the other side to the mall, give you an overview of the mall, and then maybe I'll drag you into the National Gallery while you're somewhat fresh and take you through there. It's my favorite museum in Washington with all of the fine arts. So you see how close our hotel is to the mall, just a block away. Air and Space Museum right across the street. The Smithsonian is the world's largest museum complex. It's got 140 million objects, one for everybody. 14 buildings, annual budget of $500 million. And it all started with a gift from James Smithson of $500,000. And therefore, the first place we pop into, yes, is the National Air and Space Museum. Question: what is the most popular museum in the world? You're looking at it, this is the place. And here's one of the reasons. They have the original Wright Flyer, and they've got the original Gemini spacecraft side by side. What a juxtaposition. There's contrast of the old and the new here at the Air and Space Museum. You've got full, complete aircraft hanging from the ceiling and parked on the floor. There's spaceships, there's rocket men. There's a collection of 360 aircraft and 300 rockets and spacecraft and hundreds of engines and propellers and satellites and spacesuits, instruments, flight instruments. It's an interactive museum with 23 galleries, each of them devoted to a subject or a theme. Here's the lunar lander. The astronauts walked on the moon, and here's how they did it. You're surrounded here by visual excitement. There's theaters, there's multimedia shows, dioramas, interactive computers. You can see the evolution of spacesuits to the Gemini, to the lunar lander spacesuit. They got bigger and bigger and more efficient, just as the entire space program evolved over time. The first space capsule didn't even have a computer on board. A replica of the world's first satellite is here, the Sputnik, from the Soviet Union, basketball-sized hunk of metal. At the other extreme, we've got Skylab, a mock-up of the first orbiting space station. And among this forest of rockets in the main space hall, you'll find the Apollo-Soyuz test project. It was the first international manned space mission. 1975, America and Russia teaming up in outer space. This has to be one of the great hallmarks in the end of the Cold War, cooperation between America and Russia. And here it is, right in front of your eyes. Rockets for peace, not rockets to blow each other up. The Saturn V rocket was the largest rocket engine ever built in America. And at the other extreme, we have a bicycle-powered airplane that flew across the English Channel. They've got everything here at the Air and Space. And this is just one of half a dozen major museums at the Smithsonian on the Mall in Washington. Just about all of these objects are real, the real thing. In a few cases, like the lunar lander, they have the backup when they couldn't recover them, like also the Sputnik. They have a Sputnik, but it's a model of the Sputnik. But otherwise, the rest of it is the real thing. For example, that's the Explorer that flew around the world without landing. And it was the first flight that ever went around the world without landing and without refueling. There's the X-1 over there. And the first plane, the first rocket plane, it broke the sound barrier, piloted by Chuck Yeager. And this is the X-15. It took suborbital flights. And then we've got the Apollo 11 capsule right here. The Wright brothers flyer. The actual plane that the Wright brothers flew is right there. It's really phenomenal. There's about 20 galleries in this museum, and they have wonderful exhibits all about the space technology, satellites, telecommunications, the evolution of rockets. The lunar lander is down at the far end there. That is a beautiful thing to have a look at. It's like you're standing on the moon with them. There's a lot more rockets down there. There's the Skylab too. You can walk into the Skylab. They have some changing exhibits and a lot of permanent exhibits as well. And the balloon that just went around the world is here already. So here's John Glenn's spacecraft. So that's the real capsule that John Glenn flew in, Friendship 7. Another of the interesting buildings is the Arts and Industries. This was America's first national museum. And it's still functioning today. It highlights the technology of early America. It's built in the Victorian neo-Romanesque style of architecture, and it contains items from America's centennial exhibit in 1876. Enjoying the museums of the Smithsonian at the National Mall. The Museum of American History is probably the most fascinating of all the museums here for the general audience. They've got something for everybody. One of their most moving permanent exhibits focuses on the Japanese in America during World War II, with a section for us on the Japanese in Hawaii. And this brought back memories for our group, including from Barton Nagata, who was one of the soldiers fighting the war, and they had a little war exhibit that was just like being there.
Because I was a forward observer for a while, I could see the smoke shell come, and we adjust the fire. Our specialty was timed fire. We would fire about 30 feet above the machine gun, enemy machine gun. And the shell would explode because of the timing effect, and all the shrapnel would go down and wipe out the German machine gun or cease fire. Mission accomplished.
After you blow them up.
After you blow them up.
And warfare from a different era of American history is also on display, with some ancient cannons and scale models of early sailing warships. There's suits of armor, there's weapons, there's politics on display, of course, in our nation's capital. You can't get away without the vote, without campaigning, without all the memorabilia. There's a display of ancient coinage with examples of these minute little pieces of currency. On the other scale, we've got railroads, bridges, and tunnels. There's power machinery, there's electricity, there's the role of science, there's an American living room from the 1950s. The presidents and their first ladies are on display. We've got the china, we've got the ball gowns, we've got a ceremonial court. Reconstructions of parts of the White House are visible here. And at the other extreme, the impoverished life of American immigrants at the turn of the century is on display, the most densely populated housing in the world in New York City's Lower East Side. Tenement flats, many of which still exist today. Altogether, the Smithsonian Institution has got 140 million objects. You can never see them all in 25 lifetimes, but you might want to go into the Hirshhorn Museum as well for some contemporary art. In front of us is the National Gallery, and to the right of it is the East Wing. It's the modernistic angular building over there that's part of the National Gallery. It has the 20th century collection. So one of our great highlights in the trip in Washington is the National Gallery of Art. There are many museums on the mall. They've got history museums, science, technology, there's Arts of Asia, and the best museum of all, in my opinion, is the National Gallery of Art. It's got indoor gardens, there's beautiful courtyards inside, it's all free, so you can just come and go at will here. There's also a cafeteria downstairs in the basement that makes a nice eating spot. And next door is the East Wing, which is all part of the National Gallery. And in the East Wing, they have some special exhibits. Today, we were lucky enough to catch an exhibit of ancient China. A lot of bronze pieces here and a suit of jade. You might have seen still photos of that, but there you can see the real thing. Also in the East Wing, we've got some 20th century art, sculpture by Brancusi, paintings by Picasso and Matisse and Leger. A vast atrium with a mobile by Calder. Back in the main body of the National Gallery, here's a masterpiece by Van Eyck. Flemish painter, there's Botticelli's, there's the Italian Renaissance in force here at the National Gallery. And if you're a certified artist, you can go in and make some copies. Here's Daniel in the Lion's Den by Rubens. There are several masterpieces here by Rubens. And there's a room full of Rembrandts, his portrait of Lucretia, the great old masters of the National Gallery. Jan Steen with one of his earthy peasant scenes, and Vermeer, perhaps the greatest of all painters. That's our quick highlights for the program. You've just got to go there in person. Nice temperature for walking around. Feels like about 60 degrees, 62. We're visiting in late October, which is an ideal time to be here in Washington. One of the new features is the sculpture garden right on the mall, just next to the National Gallery and in front of the archives. Already we're completing our first day in Washington and looking forward to the activities of tomorrow. Tomorrow, the schedule is we'll meet in the lobby at 8:45. And we will walk over to the castle, the Smithsonian Castle. And that's where they have the visitor information center with that introductory museum and little pamphlets and things. And then at 10 a.m. we can do that tourmobile tour of the monuments, and that'll take us around to the various spots. Starting out another day, it's just 8:45 in the morning, leaving the hotel, and we're heading for the castle, because the castle is the only Smithsonian building that's open before 10 o'clock. And it's a nice information orientation center. Opens at 9 o'clock every morning. In the castle, they've got a movie that helps you get oriented. They've got brochures, they have models and maps. And it's a beautiful building to have a look inside. Nice view. Yeah. The building right in front of you there is the Arts and Industries building, and it was the first museum on the mall. The castle was the first building on the mall, and this one was put up after that Philadelphia Centennial Exposition, which happened in 1879. Well, they moved all of the stuff from Philadelphia to Washington, and they put it into this building. And it's constructed in a neo-Romanesque style, with all those rounded brick arches and turrets. Right next to it is the castle, and that's where we're heading. It's opening its doors in a minute. The Hop Gardens have fountains and benches and beautiful flowers. There's flower pots hanging, and it makes a nice little stroll. So let's have a walk in the garden right over this way. Underneath this garden is a couple of museums. Over here is the Freer Museum. That's F-R-E-E-R, Freer Museum. Now all the museums on the mall are free, but that one is freer. The main focus of the collection here is Asian art, with outstanding examples from Southeast Asia as well as Japan. And then there's the Sackler, which is here. And the Sackler Underground has a special exhibit right now on the art of Mesopotamia. Naturally, you're going to find an excellent gift shop in every museum here on the mall in Washington. And there's also a museum of African art underneath us. So don't forget the Hauptgarten. You could easily overlook it because it's tucked in behind the castle, between the Freer and the Sackler and the Arts and Industries. Yep, when you're looking for something to do at 9 in the morning on the mall, this is the only game in town because it's the only building that opens at 9.
What?
The castle. All the other museums open at 10. Walking through the neo-Romanesque portal of the front door of the castle, inside you'll find a variety of informative displays. Here's an overall map of the city, a 3D model. There's a map of the metro, which lights up to tell you how to get from one spot to the next. And there's the crypt of James Smithson. His remains are buried here. And the castle has a restaurant and a lounge and a short 15-minute movie that tells you about all the highlights of the Smithsonian. Another one of the great museums on the mall is the Museum of Natural History. But the Natural History Museum is not just about animals and gems and bugs. It's got a lot of human cultural displays in here as well. There is an exhibit on the Ainu. They've got exhibits on the Native Americans and a cafeteria. And just outside, we happen to run into the Marine Marathon. And out on the mall, we find a willing volunteer to help take some of our group photos, a classic shot with the Capitol building behind us. Hello, our Hawaii Geographic tour group. We're traveling together down the East Coast.